Rent in 25 US towns has gotten so extreme that people over 50 are being forced out of their homes and into R-Vees, not for adventure, but because they literally have nowhere else to go. These aren't luxury markets. These are places where seniors lived for decades, suddenly hit with rent spikes so brutal they feel like eviction notices. And here's the part almost nobody realizes. Once these towns passed a certain rent threshold, RV parks became the default shelter for older adults living on fixed income. Some towns are seeing more 50-plus residents in RVs than in actual apartments. Why these towns? Why now? And why seniors first? Rent shock in 25 towns. In 25 US towns, rents have surged so aggressively that older residents describe the same moment of realization. The numbers simply stop working. These towns stretch from coastal Maine to inland California, and every one of them saw rental spikes that blindsided people living on fixed checks. A one-bedroom that cost $800 a month only a few years ago now demands $1,400, $1,500 or more. For someone living on a predictable monthly income, that jump lands like a financial eviction notice. The shock does not come slowly. A renewal letter arrives, a landlord adjusts the rate, or a building changes ownership. Overnight, the margin that kept someone afloat disappears. In places like Bend, Traverse City, and Asheville, the increases hit hardest because supply never caught up. Each year adds more pressure, not relief. Many older adults try to bridge the gap with savings, selling possessions, or delaying medical expenses. Yet the rent still climbs, and the math still collapses. Once the monthly payment rises beyond income, the town that someone lived in for decades becomes unaffordable in a single season. But the deeper crisis is not just the price, it is the growing wave of older renters arriving all at once, the surge no one planned for. The population shift inside these 25 towns happened quietly at first. More adults over 50 began renting after losing homes in downturns, downsizing after health events, or returning to the workforce later in life. Over 2 full decades, that trickle became a flood. Towns designed for younger workers suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by a demographic they never expected to support. This surge pushed demand far beyond available units. In smaller markets like Prescott, Coeur d'Alene, and Rapid City, vacancy rates fell so sharply that landlords gained complete control over pricing. New arrivals from larger cities added more pressure, competing for the same limited rentals. With every new lease, the baseline rent rose again. Older renters feel the shift more intensely because their income does not move with the market. When wages rise, younger tenants can sometimes chase higher-paying work. Older adults cannot. So as demand continues building, they get priced out first, fastest, and with the fewest alternatives available. The towns themselves were never prepared for this demographic swing. The result is a rental landscape that tightens every year, pushing people toward choices they never imagined making. And once base rent becomes unmanageable, the secondary costs stacked on top create a second financial blow. If you find this breakdown useful, make sure you like and subscribe. It helps this investigation reach others dealing with the same pressure. Share your thoughts as well. The more perspectives we gather, the clearer the real picture behind these towns becomes. The hidden cost stack, rent alone, is not what pushes people out of these 25 towns. It is the stack of rising costs that sits on top. Utility rates, especially in regions with harsh winters or outdated grids, have climbed steadily. Electricity surcharges, water fees, and seasonal heating costs now take a larger bite out of the monthly budget than ever before. For older adults, these expenses turn the total housing cost into a number far beyond what rent reflects. Insurance adds another layer. Many of these towns sit in wildfire corridors, hurricane-exposed coasts, or areas where aging buildings raise liability premiums. Policies that once cost a few $100s a year now demand well over $1,000, sometimes more. Those increases arrive without warning, and older renters cannot challenge them. Medical inflation completes the squeeze. When an older adult must choose between paying a higher utility bill or filling a prescription, the system has already failed. These stacked expenses force impossible decisions. And every month brings new unpredictability. What looked manageable on paper becomes unlivable when bills arrive all at once, with rent rising and every added expense tightening the noose. Many older adults reach a moment where a new housing path becomes the only option left, the pivot. When rent, utilities, insurance, and medical bills combine into a monthly total that exceeds fixed income, many older adults in these 25 towns reach the same conclusion. Staying put is no longer financially possible. The search for alternatives leads them somewhere unexpected, toward RV living, not as a lifestyle choice, but as a form of survival. The pivot begins with simple math. An older RV can be purchased outright or financed at a level far below the cost of a full year's rent. Monthly expenses shift from unpredictable rent increases to manageable campground fees, fuel budgeting, and maintenance planning. For many, it becomes the only path that keeps costs within reach. This is not a romantic decision. It is not about chasing freedom or exploring the open road. It is about avoiding a financial cliff in towns where the housing market has already left them behind. As more people make the move, the pattern becomes clear. The traditional rental system failed them, and the RV becomes the last available lifeline. The escape is not easy, but it is attainable. And in these 25 towns, it is rapidly becoming the default exit route for older adults priced out of their own communities. But why did these specific 25 towns reach the breaking point faster than anywhere else? The red zones. Across the country, certain towns experienced rent increases at a pace far beyond national averages. These red zone regions stand out on every housing report, and the pattern is not random. The fastest jumps appear in places absorbing heavy migration from larger cities, where incoming residents arrive with significantly higher income flexibility than the locals who already live there. As newcomers enter these towns, the remaining housing inventory becomes a competitive arena. A single vacant unit can attract several applicants within hours, and fixed-income residents cannot match the higher bids. These bidding pressures raise the baseline rent for the entire area, even for long-term tenants who planned to stay in their homes for years. The shock is amplified in smaller towns where the total number of rental units is limited. Another clear signal inside these red zone towns is the compression of vacancy rates. When availability drops to near zero, landlords feel no resistance to raising prices aggressively. With demand exceeding supply so sharply, the increase becomes self-reinforcing. These red zone areas form the front edge of the displacement map, showing exactly where older residents are losing their financial footing first. The numbers continue to climb, and the pattern is only accelerating. But the pressure is even more intense in places where seasonal tourism reshapes the rental market several times a year. Tourist-driven markets. In towns built around tourism, the rental market behaves differently from the national norm. Prices climb not because of migration or job growth, but because seasonal visitors redefine what landlords can charge. When short-term stays become more profitable than year-long leases, the entire market tilts away from the people who actually live there. Owners convert traditional rentals into vacation listings, reducing the number of available units for local residents. Once the supply thins, year-round tenants face higher prices simply because there are fewer options left. This rotation happens repeatedly across a calendar year. Each busy season resets expectations, and landlords benchmark long-term rent against what they earn from short bursts of visitor demand. For older renters, this volatility is financially devastating. A person living on fixed income cannot compete with the surge pricing driven by holiday travelers, festival crowds, or peak vacation weeks. When the season ends, the elevated rates remain in place, locking locals into costs designed for short-term profit rather than sustainable living. This pressure is most visible in coastal areas, mountain towns, and historic districts, where tourism is the main economic engine. For many long-time residents, the hometown they knew becomes financially unreachable within a single lease cycle. And while tourism distorts markets, another set of towns faces a very different force: wage inflation from high-earning newcomers, Boom town inflation. Some towns did not grow because of tourism, but because new industries moved in faster than housing could keep up. Tech employers, distribution hubs, and remote work clusters produced sudden wage increases that reshaped the rental landscape almost overnight. As higher income workers arrived, landlords adjusted prices to match the new earning potential. Older residents found themselves competing with people who could pay several $100s more without hesitation. A retiree living on a structured income cannot enter a bidding contest with someone earning a modern tech salary. Even modest units were pulled out of financial reach as landlords began calibrating rent around incoming workers rather than long-time residents. These boomtown conditions create a split economy where two groups live side by side but experience entirely different levels of affordability. Grocery stores, service shops, and transportation costs often rise as well, reflecting the higher purchasing power of the new arrivals. The overall effect is a widening gap between what the market demands and what fixed-income households can realistically pay. Once the dynamic takes hold, it rarely reverses. Infrastructure expands, new projects begin, and the town adapts to a higher cost structure. For older renters, the shift is immediate and unforgiving. But economic growth is not the only force pushing people out. Some towns are becoming unaffordable because insurance costs have doubled or collapsed altogether. Insurance collapse zones. There are towns where housing costs do not rise because of migration or wages, but because insurance becomes nearly impossible to afford. In regions hit by storms, floods, wildfires, or repeated natural disasters, insurance premiums have climbed at a rate far beyond what older households can manage. In some cases, premiums have doubled within a single year, turning previously stable rentals into financial hazards. Landlords facing higher coverage costs pass those increases directly into rent, but some go further by refusing to renew leases unless tenants agree to additional fees meant to offset rising risk. For older residents, the impact is immediate. Even if rent itself does not rise sharply, the added insurance-related charges push total housing expenses beyond reach. These insurance collapse zones also affect buildings differently, depending on age and construction type. Older structures receive steeper adjustments, and many seniors live in precisely those units. When carriers reduce coverage or withdraw completely, landlords may require tenants to purchase their own supplemental protection, adding another layer of cost that fixed income cannot stretch to cover. In these towns, the financial displacement does not unfold slowly. It arrives in a single notice, a revised premium, or a discontinued policy. With the map now clear, the next section reveals what these pressures mean for people turning toward RV, living as their last predictable option. The first 30 days, the first month of switching from traditional housing to full-time RV life, carries more financial weight than most expect. Even if the overall goal is to save money, the initial transition brings its own set of expenses that hit all at once. Buyers who pick up a pre-owned unit often face immediate inspection fees, title transfers, and state-specific registration charges before they even move in. Campgrounds and long-term parks usually require deposits equal to a full month of space rental. Utilities at these locations may be separate, adding another line item that needs to be paid upfront. Some parks also request proof of insurance, which leads to another round of upfront payments before an older adult can legally stay on site. Outfitting the interior becomes another necessary cost. Items like stabilization blocks, hoses, power adapters, replacement bedding, and cookware add up quickly. Even modest purchases accumulate into a significant total, especially for people who assumed the RV would be ready to use immediately. For many new full-timers, the first 30 days feel like a financial sprint rather than a soft landing. The pressure does not eliminate the long-term benefits, but it introduces a steep starting point that must be managed carefully. Once the setup phase settles, another challenge emerges from the mechanical side, and it carries costs that can escalate without warning. If you want straightforward updates without the noise, subscribe. These shifts are happening quickly, and staying ahead of them makes a real difference. I cover the numbers, the patterns, and the consequences so you can see what's coming before it reaches your town. Mechanical debt. After the first month on the road, the next financial hurdle appears under the hood. Older RVs often come with wear patterns that only reveal themselves once the unit is used full-time. Components such as brakes, alternators, cooling systems, and suspension parts, face loads far heavier than what they experienced during occasional vacation trips. Repair shops have seen a rise in parts shortages, which pushes prices higher for essential components. When a technician cannot find a replacement part locally, they often order from national suppliers who charge premium rates. Shipping delays add more downtime and, in some cases, additional costs if the RV must remain in a paid storage lot during the wait. Labor rates now mirror dealership pricing, and diagnosing older RVs can take hours before repairs even start. One breakdown can trigger towing, diagnostics, parts, and labor. Mechanical debt builds quietly, creating unpredictable bills that rarely fit within a fixed income budget. And while maintenance drains resources, another set of expenses comes from local enforcement and the rules governing where an RV can legally stay. Enforcement and legal pressure. Living full-time in an RV means navigating a patchwork of local ordinances, and the financial consequences of missteps can be substantial. Many towns have tightened rules on overnight parking, street stays, and extended presence in public lots. A single violation can result in a citation that immediately cuts into a limited monthly budget. Parking restrictions often change without clear notice. Some areas post time limits that shift seasonally, and enforcement officers interpret these rules strictly. If an RV exceeds the allowed stay by even a few hours, the owner may face escalating penalties. Older adults who believed they found a safe, quiet place to park may wake up to a fine attached to the windshield. Towing creates rapid expenses, with fees and storage charges often consuming a full month's income. Counties that require special permits add another layer of pressure, and parks that enforce these rules strictly turn every missed requirement into new costs and ongoing financial strain. And beyond the legal system, another burden emerges from a place few expect: the healthcare network that depends on a permanent address. Health costs of mobility. Medical care relies heavily on paperwork, and one of the most important details in that paperwork is a stable home address. When an older adult begins full-time RV living, that stability disappears, and the financial consequences appear quickly. Insurance companies often require address verification for coverage updates, prescription refills, and routine claims. Without a permanent location, these processes become unpredictable. Pharmacies may restrict certain medications from being transferred repeatedly across state lines, which forces RV owners to plan routes around refill schedules rather than personal needs. This limitation can result in emergency costs if a prescription runs out and an urgent care visit becomes necessary. Some healthcare providers refuse follow-ups without a verified address, and regional clinics may charge more when records do not match long-term residency. Mail forwarding helps, but cannot prevent delays, lapses, or denied claims, creating extra expenses that traditional renters rarely encounter. With these pressures in view, the next section looks ahead at what the future holds and how the housing system itself is changing. Market failure. The current housing structure was never designed for the number of older renters who now depend on it. For decades, planning assumptions leaned heavily on the expectation that most people entering retirement would own their homes outright. As economic shocks changed that expectation, the supply system failed to adapt. Builders continued focusing on younger workers, not on the growing population entering their 60s and 70s with limited flexibility. This mismatch created a structural shortfall. Towns that once had enough affordable rentals for older residents now face shrinking inventories and increasing competition. Construction timelines stretch for years, and new projects often target higher-income tenants, not people living on fixed monthly checks. The market responds to profit signals, not demographic realities, and the gap widens each year as more adults reach retirement age without housing stability. The result is a breakdown that goes beyond high rent. It is a system that cannot absorb the demographic shift, leaving older renters without a sustainable path. Without targeted development, the imbalance will continue, pushing those on limited budgets toward alternatives they never expected to consider. And when the system does not protect older renters, the next failure becomes clear in the policies built to shield them from rising costs. The policy vacuum. Housing policy in many areas has not kept up with the rapid changes in rental markets. Rent control is rare, and where it exists, it often excludes smaller buildings or newly constructed units. Older renters living in towns without these protections face annual increases with no legal cap. Even modest jumps compound quickly for households living on predictable monthly income. Subsidy programs meant to help older adults often have long wait lists, and the number of available units supported by these programs has not grown at the pace required. Many applicants wait years before receiving assistance, and some never receive it at all. During that wait, each rent adjustment eats further into savings. Zoning restrictions block smaller rental options, keeping supply tight and costs unstable. Without reform, subsidies cannot offset the pressure. Policy gaps leave older adults exposed, turning every market shift into a displacement risk. With no protections, the cycle continues unchecked. Yet, even as traditional housing fails, new solutions are beginning to emerge in places willing to experiment. The new alternatives. Across the country, communities are testing new approaches to address the growing demand for affordable senior housing. One of the most promising options is the development of tiny home villages built specifically for older adults. These compact units offer manageable monthly expenses and include shared infrastructure that lowers total operating costs. Residents benefit from predictable payments without the volatility of traditional rentals. Modular housing is also gaining traction. Factories can assemble units quickly, and installation requires less time than conventional construction. Because these homes can be scaled in clusters, towns can create senior-focused neighborhoods without waiting for multi-year building projects to finish. This model offers a middle ground, stable housing without the complexity and maintenance concerns that come with full-time RV living. Some cities are testing micro-communities for older residents, using smaller footprints and shared services to lower per-household costs. These early models are not luxury concepts, but practical attempts to match fixed-income budgets and address long-term affordability challenges in a shifting housing landscape. But even with new options emerging, older adults still need clear steps to protect themselves as the market continues to shift. The road ahead. The future of senior housing will depend heavily on timing and awareness. Market pressures are not slowing down, and older adults need strategies that reduce risk before the next wave of cost increases arrives. The first step is recognizing early signs that a town's affordability is changing. When vacancy rates tighten, new construction pauses, or insurance premiums spike, those signals often indicate that rent will follow. Awareness also means tracking local decisions. Zoning meetings, development proposals, and infrastructure updates shape the supply of housing, and changes in these areas affect future costs. Understanding these shifts helps households anticipate when to stay, when to negotiate, and when to consider alternatives. Early decisions offer more stability than choices made under pressure. Smaller units or senior-focused housing can reduce reliance on unstable monthly costs. The landscape keeps shifting, but people who track these signals stay ahead. Understanding how the market moves becomes the first layer of protection when predictability disappears. This crisis is growing, and these 25 towns are only the warning signs. If rent spikes or RV overflow are happening near you, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you stay ahead of what's coming next. More insight is on the way.